my friends, it's your old pal Jordan the Lion, and today we are in Fairfax County, Virginia, knocking off another one on my bucket list. We're going to Mount Vernon, the home and the grounds of George Washington, father of our country. First president of the United States. Daze with Jordan the Lion. It begins now. Not only are we going to see his estate with his wife Martha, but we're going to also see his grave, or their grave. We made it. All right, as we walk into the visitor center, there he is. Oh, and look at that. Life-size statues. He was 6'2". You can see his grandson, Washi, and George, Martha, and Nellie, granddaughter. It was said that he met Martha, and after 20 hours of being around her, he asked her to marry him, and then they were married after a total of 15 days of knowing each other. Passing by their little gift shop here. Then here's a replica of Mount Vernon, which we're gonna see today. You can see all the inside rooms in here, but I don't want to spoil it too much because I bought a tour. Take a look at this amazing stained glass. It's depicting the reading of the Declaration of Independence to George Washington. And that's the old story of George Washington chopping down a cherry tree on his father's estate, which was not this estate, but a lot of people say that didn't even happen. There's Washington crossing the Delaware. He was, at the time when all the colonists were getting tired of England taking so much of their money in taxes, they wanted to do a revolt, and so John Adams nominated George Washington to lead the military, and they were victorious because of him. He knew if he wasn't victorious that he would not only lose Mount Vernon, but he would be hanged as a traitor. And this is him taking the oath for the presidency, which he did not want a title. He was embarrassed when he would walk into a room and they would announce him, so he would show up early and already be staged so they couldn't announce him. Very humble guy. At one time they wanted to refer to what would be the presidency as maybe the king of the United States, and he wasn't a fan of that either. His first term they wanted to put him on the money, and he didn't like that. He thought it was very Caesar-esque. Here you can see it says, "The love of my country will be the ruling influence of my conduct. Constitution is the guide, which I will never abandon." It says here that Thomas Edison designed and installed Mount Vernon's first electrical system in 1916. As we explore the museum part, there's George at the age of 19. He was said to be quite awkward. Couldn't hold a conversation, was very shy. It's depicting him as a surveyor. This is showing part of Pochuk Church, where the Washingtons went to church. It's one of the church pews. And that's one of the communion chalices that George Washington would have taken communion out of from Pochuk Church. And here we have artifacts of Martha Washington, who was said to be very social, very likable, kind of the opposite of him. That's her dress and some of her jewelry and some reproduction shoes, it says. And that is depicting George working as architect to add on to Mount Vernon. Following the practice of the day, Washington campaigned at local taverns buying drinks for potential voters. In 1758, he picked up the tab of more than 150 gallons of rum, punch, wine, brandy, beer, and hard cider. Won him 307 votes and a seat in the House of Burgess. And that's representing the taxation and the tea and everything. And then this was a gift to the Washingtons from George William and Sally Fairfax. Sally Fairfax was a woman who kind of taught George how to be more regal when he was young. She was part of the family, and like George's brother married into. And even though she was married, George would end up developing a fixation on her. When he was 16, she was in her 20s, he was writing her love letters, but she would tell him it could only be friendship ever. And this is showing the army conditions, which when he was general, that was one of the things, he was asking for more help from the government, and they were telling him, oh, just go and go confiscate whatever you need from local farmers, just take it from them. And he said, I don't want to take from them. You find a way to provide for us. And it was said that he was always out in amongst everything. He would be, when there was a battle going on, he wasn't hiding. He was out there in it, or he was making a plan for what they were going to do next, with gunfire going past his tent. There he is at Valley Forge. Now, of course, everybody knows about George Washington's teeth. Well, they think they do. I always heard that he had wooden teeth. Let's see if they are or not. There they are. George Washington's dentures. It says, although he brushed his teeth regularly, by the time he took the oath of office as president at the age of 57, he was wearing full dentures. Contrary to popular myth, Washington's false teeth are not made of wood, but of human and cow teeth, as well as elephant ivory. Dentures required frequent adjusting to function naturally, and Washington repeatedly sent him to John Greenwood, his dentist, in New York for repairs. Did he have backups? Take a look at the backside. That's what would have went in his mouth. I love wax figures, and that's a perfect one. Look at that. He's getting inaugurated. They said by the time his second term was done, they wanted him to take over a third term. They said no way. He couldn't wait to be done. So that is a reproduction of his coffin. It says 4 days after he died, Washington was laid to rest. An elaborate ceremony, Mount Vernon. Ships cannons from the Potomac boomed to salute. The band played a solemn dirge as a funeral procession of hundreds escorted his lead-lined coffin to the family tomb beyond Washington's home. The stunned nation also bid farewell for many months after, staging mock funerals and offering up heartfelt eulogies to the departed hero. And these are all articles owned by George Washington. His pocket watch, pocket knife, china. And then upon his death, he wanted all of his slaves to be freed. He also set aside considerable funds to provide for his slaves, for whom they set out to live as free men, women, and children. Mrs. Washington wasted no time freeing the slaves a year after his death. And this represents Martha moving to the 3rd floor of Mount Vernon and living there after George died, till she died 2 years later. Now I've got my guide map. Let's go. I think I want to start by finding his burial place, and then we're going to take the tour and walk the grounds. Now, Virginia was an aristocratic state, so really to get anywhere you had to come from a good family or know people. His family was not that upper echelon, but his father's son from his first marriage married into the Fairfax family. And so when George's dad died, his father's son Lawrence inherited everything, but also became like a surrogate father to George and introduced him to the Fairfax family. I see Washington Tomb. Quite a bit of slaves and people to help take care of the grounds. It was a tobacco plantation, And when the price of tobacco started to drop, they were losing so much money and going into debt that George had the idea to replant something like fruits and vegetables, and it became successful again, and that's how they saved keeping Mount Vernon. Look at that out there. So even though George Washington did have slaves, he was pretty for desegregation, and it was him who actually came up with the idea of letting black soldiers fight in the Revolutionary War and then offering them their freedom afterward. I guess he believed being part of, as a slave, being part of a family kept them secure, made sure that they always had food and they were taken care of, and he also allowed his slaves to raise their own vegetables and sell them to make extra money. Here's some of Washington's sheep. Sorry, it is extremely windy out here. Right here is their fruit garden. You can see here it says that they produce mostly apples, cherries, peaches, and fruits needed in the kitchen. Vegetables, grains, and pasture grasses were grown in beds and allowed to go seed, providing the seed essential to next year's planting. I think we're getting close. Right down the end of this path is the tomb. Here they have a little thing commenting about how much George loved the trees and everything here, and that says half of his estate, the 8,000 acres, was forested. And he would say, "It is always in one's power to cut a tree down, but time only can place them where one would have them after the ground is stripped." They say that as they have workers out here and machines going. Wow, I can't believe I'm actually here. I played George Washington in our elementary school play in 5th grade, so I've always had a fondness for George Washington. And here it is. They have it opened up and they're working on it, doing some sort of restoration in there. Now, when he died, basically what happened was that he was out riding his horse on the grounds here and fell ill throughout the day, and then at night couldn't even talk and just felt death coming on, and told his assistant to make sure not to bury him too soon, like not too early, because he wanted to make sure that he was actually dead. And then he repeated it again to make sure that his assistant heard him, and then he closed his eyes and passed away. I don't know what they're doing in there, but that's where his body is laid to rest, like you can see up there. It says within this enclosure rests the remains of General George Washington. I don't have any clue what they're doing in there. Some sort of work. Now this memorial right here says this is to John Augustine Washington, Lieutenant Colonel, and his wife Eleanor Selden, the last private owners of Mount Vernon, buried at Charlestown, West Virginia. So yeah, I don't know what they're doing, but I don't know. I've never been here before, so I don't know if you can normally see in there or not. It has some big black doors that they have there. But there's some more family members buried around the outside, so this is his family cemetery. So here on this stone, you'll see it's for a man named Bushrod Washington. He was a local judge here and also the nephew to General George Washington. You can see there that he was the son of John Washington, who we saw the other stone for. Well, this is not what I always planned on my first visit to Mount Vernon to see his grave like this, but Hey, it is what it is. Let's go see the house now.